Hi, welcome to Canboulay Training and Development. My name is Camille McMillan Rambarat, and this is our third installment of Work Shouldn't Hurt and Change Matters. I have with me today someone from ITA, and his name is Dave Coleman. And I'm so happy, well, I shouldn't say we are so lucky that Dave is taking time out of his busy schedule just to join us and share a little bit about workplace bullying and harassment in the workplace. What programs is he involved in, and what ITA is doing to bring awareness to this topic. So Dave, welcome so very much. Thank you. And why don't you tell our listening audience a little bit about yourself? I went onto your LinkedIn profile to read about you, to learn more, and you have a lot of years of experience in the trade. So let us hear a little bit about you.
Sure. Thank you, Camille. Yes, I have been in the trades for a very long time. I'm an older gentleman, going back to the 70s when I did my apprenticeship, so it's a long time ago. And of course, I've watched things grow and develop over the years within the trades and within the workplace. And I have children who are now grown, and I have supported them as they went into the trades themselves and started seeking opportunities in those kind of careers. So I have one son who's a tradesman, and then I have three daughters, two of which are also in the trades. And so I've seen it kind of from a bunch of different perspectives. Throughout my career, of course, in the trade myself, we didn't see as many women in the trades going back into the 70s and 80s, but that has certainly increased a lot over the last while. And as I've watched things grow and change, we've seen women getting into careers that were really not traditionally women's fields, and that has caused some pain and difficulty as things have gone along. And I think, as the title of this discussion, "Work Shouldn't Hurt," I think that's so true. And nobody gets into these jobs, expecting to have to fight every day to survive, just to earn a living. Yeah. I was also for several years, 8 years, I was the director of education for the Roofing Contractors Association of BC. And so that's a very heavily male-dominated industry. And yet I see women coming into that trade as well to work on these crews because the pay is significant. And they can't earn that kind of money working in a retail setting or what would often be considered a woman's kind of a job.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that change a lot over the last several decades.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So tell me, for those who don't know, tell us about IT. What is ITA role in all of this?
Okay, so ITA, the Industry Training Authority, is really a program standards body. Our role is to identify to work with industry, and then to determine what is to be taught or learned at various levels of apprenticeship. So but then we develop that in conjunction with the training providers and the employers and people in that industry. And then we ask the training providers to deliver that information to apprentices over a period of whatever is determined, generally 3 to 4 years for a trade. Our role in it is really to manage the standards so that we're sure that people being trained in Vancouver are being trained the same in Prince George or in Terrace or Victoria throughout the province. And then we assist them to become certified as BC tradespeople with nationally recognized credentials in most cases. So our role is really to support, help, drive, direct high school students, active apprentices, employers, training providers, anybody who's a stakeholder in that kind of role, to make sure the system works, make sure that when people get into the trade that we have a clear pathway for them to follow. And as in any employment situation, everybody comes to it from their particular perspective, and we have to try to make sure that the system applies to all of them, background, regardless of their history, regardless of what kind of work they do generally. So our role is really to help people get through the apprenticeship and through the certification. I spend a fair bit of my time working with people who have failed exams, trying to work on remedial programs and study supports so that they can be successful and get certified at the end of the day. But at the same time, we also do a lot of work with other special interest groups. And ITA in 2019 joined with the BC Centre for Women in Trades and to support what we call the Be More Than a Bystander program. And so we're looking very carefully at what happens on the job site, what happens in the workplace, and trying to help people to understand that we need to actively do something to change what's really a somewhat abrasive culture in the workplace. And so our role is in participating in that is to try to carry that message out as we go to speak to apprenticeship classes, as we speak to employers and other groups. That really we should not have to deal with these kind of things. And when they happen, we can't just sit quietly by and do nothing, because that really is not just ignoring the problem, but it's actually supporting or encouraging the problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So our role is really to try and keep the system moving forward and make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to succeed, regardless of gender and race and so on.
And that's how I tracked you down, because being a survivor of workplace bullying and harassment, and you spoke about the silencing. And one of the things, very few organizations are willing to speak up about workplace bullying and harassment. And one of I learned like so much from this horrific experience. But the main ingredient in this all is to have the bystander stand up, see something, stand up, say something. And that's what drew me to ITA with their online activism work, Be More Than a Bystander. It kept coming up. Well, maybe I was just because of the work I'm doing, I just kept, and I'm like, this is so interesting. And everyone has a role to play in workplace bullying and harassment. And one of the roles would be a bystander. However, it's easier for us to say, be more than a bystander, because people are really afraid of retaliation, losing their jobs. Like there's so many other reasons. So what are the things? So give us some sort of insight of why should I be more than a bystander, and what does that look like for me if I saw something and in the organization? What do I do, and kind of walk us through that pathway?
Sure. I think the thing that really surprised us, so just before I go there, the ITA was really committed to this. There's what we present as the facilitators for Be More Than a Bystander is a 90-minute presentation. And so it's a 90-minute PowerPoint discussion. And generally, we're speaking to men. It's usually men speaking to men. Mm-hmm. And the thing so when ITA joined this, our commitment to it was that every male member of the Industry Training Authority will attend the 3-day facilitator workshop. Not that we all become facilitators, but it's obviously much more in depth than 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But the thing that surprised us all as men is we're oblivious to how women struggle in the workplace. We're married to them, we have daughters, we have mothers, and yet we're totally oblivious, or very oblivious to what's actually going on. So just quickly, some statistics here. These are given by gender-based violence in Canada. It says 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted in their lifetime. I'm married to a woman. I have a mother and a mother-in-law. I have daughters. I just was completely unaware. But it's 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted in their lifetime. Women experience 4 times higher rates of domestic violence than anybody else, children, men. 57% of Indigenous women, 57% of Indigenous women are sexually assaulted, and 50% of transgender and non-binary people are sexually assaulted. And this one really bothers me in this last one. It says, each year, 800,000 children in Canada witness violence against women in their lives. And, I live in this happy home. I love my wife. I love my mother. I love my daughters. Nothing of that ever happens. And so I'm completely oblivious to this going on. But as we start talking about this with other people, other businesses or other genders, or women, they go, yeah, they do that. That's not surprising. And yet we just didn't even know it, didn't pay attention. And so I think one of the things that we want to do through Be More Than a Bystander is not to take the superhero approach. We don't expect you to confront and be violent or report. Or I think those are things that can be done in certain situations. But the Be More Than a Bystander program talks about the problems. It talks about the difficulties that women experience, and then it gives us some tools that we can use. So one of the first things we talk about is non-verbal intervention. If you witness something that's going on, if you see something that's happening, what can you do? One thing, you can jump in and punch the guy in the face. Okay, well, that's not what we recommend, because that just, makes it worse. But the first thing, I think sometimes the most effective is what we would call nonverbal intervention. So it can be anything by, clearing your throat so that the person knows you're in the room, paying attention. You heard that. You could just look at them with a quizzical eye to say, what the heck are you talking about? What's going on? To even make a noise, knock something off on the floor to change the moment and give a break for somebody to have a change. So we're not talking about necessarily getting in someone's face right away, but just to break that moment. In a work setting, you could say, in a verbal intervention might be, hey Bob, I need to, can you help me with this for a second? And just distract the person, take them away from it, as opposed to, starting another confrontation or reporting. I think there are times that things do need to be reported, but I think initially, just break that cycle, just to say, make it uncomfortable.
So let me just ask you, so I clear my throat, or I say, hey, Dave, can you come help me look at this outside? That's fine. But what do I do after that? Because one of the things I've noticed, and from experience, usually if someone is bullying or harassing someone with other people around, for me, I'm like, what will give you that power to do that with other people around, right? So for me, with my personal experience, it was so public. There's always a build-up to it, the microaggressions, right? So many things, pieces that go unchecked. And you do your best to navigate that, because sometimes it can be someone in leadership. And for me, for it being so public, I remember asking myself, this couldn't be the first time. I couldn't have been the first person. For this to be done so in public, that seemed like a lifetime. I call it was a lynching. That this person was used to doing this. That people in the organization would have maybe cleared their throats in the past and just moved on.
Yeah.
Right? So that's my point I'm getting to. Like, at what point shouldn't, even if I cleared my throat, took you outside, and I say, hey, what's happening? What did I just witness? How can I help? That is all great, but not focusing on the perpetrator. That person needs to be, not me going to them directly, but there needs to be something else to check put them in check right away. So what does that look like?
Well, I think that's what we're trying to do, is to change the culture that allows that. Because the person that's doing that, as you said, that's not the first time they've done it. It's something they're used to. It's a way that they behave, and it's been tolerated or accepted, and might even be. I don't know. I don't want to use the word, accepted or supported, but maybe condoned or ignored. Therefore, it's okay. And there's somebody else who, they're looking for acceptance when they do stuff like that. And if we give it to them, then we continue to perpetuate that same problem. So, when you take the person aside, once you've got them clear, you've made sure that the person that's being harassed is safe, that the harassment is stopped, and you got that person now aside, and you're saying to them, what is the problem? Do you not understand that what you're doing is wrong? And in some cases, how far it's gone, actually illegal and can be punishable with charges. I think people, little by little, are not aware how things have changed in the last 10 years.
5 years.
5 years.
5 years. Like, we don't even have to go way back, right? Like in the last 5 years, just.
No. So 5 years ago, something that was acceptable now isn't acceptable. And the way that the laws read are, we don't care about your intention. I know it was just a joke, or it was not a big deal. Well, it's not what you meant it to be. It's how it was taken. And we have to be sensible about that. We have to be cautious about that. And so if it's somebody that I know, a coworker, and I like that coworker, and I don't want to get in trouble, I'll deal with it differently than it's someone that I've watched over and over and over be a repetitive offender. That's a time when we talk to an employer and say, you've got a problem, and you could be charged in this setting as well. You need to address it. The interesting thing that, and it goes to what you're talking about, we go through all these statistics of all the problems and the numbers of women in this situation who've been harassed or sexually harassed or assaulted. And yet when we talk to owners of companies, 93% of them say it's not a problem in their company. So there's a complete disconnect from the work floor or the workspace to the head office or the boardroom.
Do you believe them, though, Dave?
Oh no! I think they've they've convinced themselves that they've got this under control and it's not a problem in my company.
Yeah.
But that's what they report. 93% say it's not a problem, and yet 87% of the women in their workforce say they've experienced some form of harassment, bullying, or assault. And so those two things don't match.
Yeah.
And even in the conversations we have at the Industry Training Authority, we did a training session 2 weeks ago with all of the new hires, and we had women in their meetings. They said, here, these people who say it's not happening, in some cases, are the perpetrators. So
exactly. And
so we've got our work cut out for us, but we need to change the culture from this is acceptable to an everyday way that we do things to it's completely unacceptable, and everybody has a right to come to work and earn a living. That's why we work. It's not so I can feel good about myself. That's part of it. But I only work because they pay me. If they stop paying me, I'd quit coming to work.
Exactly. That goes back to, companies usually say, so why do you want this job? And I'm like, in my head, because I need to pay bills, right?
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
possible. Yeah.
I find
but I want to be safe. I find
things I like to do, but I should have the right to feel safe and showing up at work. And we have a pyramid of, how things go. And it starts with attitudes and beliefs. But the things that we see most often, the most obvious things, are jokes and expressions, and those things are in the middle of the pyramid. They're not at the bottom. They're not at the things that are starting out. If we're at jokes and comments, we're already halfway up that pyramid, which ends in homicide or suicide. But we're already halfway up that pyramid by making somebody's life miserable by just a joke. It's just, I was only kidding. Can't you take a joke? Whether it's racist, whether it's sexist, whether it's inappropriate, or whatever it is, those things have to stop. And they're, I think we're kidding ourselves if we say that's not a problem. It is a problem.
It is a problem. It's a silent epidemic. It is, right? And companies
absolutely
go.
I have the two daughters who got in.
That's what I wanted to get to with, because when you spoke to me about that, I was like, oh, that's so. So you tell this story about your daughters, because I love that story you shared with me.
I have the two daughters, and as they grew, they knew that they could make a lot more money doing what the boys did, working in the trades. But what trade would I work in? And I managed to convince them that painting was a good career, so they got into commercial painting, large buildings and so on. The first one that got into it, this is going back probably 18 years now. She was enjoying it, was very proud of herself, and she was working for a company that was just a man and a journeyman and his wife, and then my daughter as the helper. And she went out and bought her whites. They wear white shirt, white pants, white shoes. It's typical painter attire. She went out and bought her whites, which probably cost her, I don't know, $60 or something like that for a full set. And, you're a brand new apprentice making, low wages. And so she was pretty proud of herself. She got to work, and she came home the first day after wearing her whites. And she was in tears. And I said, what's the matter? And she turned around, and I could see on her bottom, on her butt, a large handprint of a man in green paint. And I just, are you kidding me? Now 18 years ago, that wasn't assault. That was just the guy being stupid. And the guy's wife even, downplayed it. Today, that's sexual assault. That's unwanted sexual assault. So we struggled with that. She managed to, she left, obviously, didn't go back to work. But we found her another situation and another situation. And she's still in, working in the trade, but that's a real scary, awful reminder that happened. And it bothers me every time I teach this class that in that moment, I was a bystander. I didn't phone the guy. I didn't complain. I didn't, phone the police. I didn't do anything. I just said, well, honey, we'll have to find you another place because I don't want you going back. That's not appropriate. That's wrong. Yeah. So I feel terrible every time I think of that.
Yeah.
My other daughter, the younger one, she got into painting as well. And she, and before I go much further, all apprentices go through a certain amount of junk. That's just kind of the rite of passage,
I know, because our two boys are in the trades. So we know, and then that's a whole different story because you bring in anti-racism, right? As a joke and saying some things, but that's a whole different story for another podcast. But continue.
But it happens. I guess it's just, that's part of the culture where I won't say haze, but we give apprentices a tough time regardless of, their race, anything else. I went through it myself with people, making fun of me or saying things, because I'm just a dumb apprentice. You have to kind of earn your stripes, so to speak. But that should change too. Yeah. But, when I talked to my daughter, it was much more. It was on steroids, the amount of harassment and stress that she'd have to go through. Men saying, this is a man's world, what are you doing here? Those kinds of things. And I think those ideas that only men can do certain kinds of work is just ridiculous. I think there are jobs where there's some really heavy weights, maybe, but there are very few trades that women can't do as well or better than most men. And anyway, so she was working there, and there was a guy that she worked with who everybody hated in the company. Like, nobody wanted to work with this guy. And I think they put her with him because they didn't want her to make it. Many people who got to work with this guy had quit. And so she went there, and she'd come home and tell me about all the things. And I'd say, honey, just, tough it out. You'll be fine. Get over it. Thinking like a guy, that I went through these things.
Thinking like a parent. Because when our daughter and son, and I spoke about this recently at another forum, being immigrants, we said that to them when they came home, right, with a different form of bullying. And you said, just brush it aside, just move on. We have to focus while we're here, right? Grow thin skin. And I look back at that and I'm like, what a horrible thing to say to young people, right? So I don't think you did it because you were a horrible man or anything. I think we too won't, these things weren't spoken about. So we didn't even know it existed, right? So what do you do with it?
Well, yeah, and it was, toughen up, take it on the chin, it'll get better, that kind of thing. Anyway, one day he blew it. He used her paintbrush and didn't clean it. Now, in the world of painting, that's a $20 item, and to a young apprentice, that's a lot more than it is to someone who's making journeyman rate. Yeah. But he didn't clean her 2 paintbrushes, and she snapped. And she went after him, and she told him off, and ripped him a new one, and just swore at him and called him every name in the book. And he actually apologized.
Really?
And he became her #1 champion because she stood up to him and said, this isn't right. And he went to bat for her on more than one occasion, and has been, she doesn't work with them anymore, but he highly recommended her to an employer. So it took her standing up to. I really sorry that she didn't get the support, but she's working in a setting where it's him and her. That's it. And so she had to stand up for herself at that point. That if I was there today, I would pull the guy aside and say, look, this kid needs a chance, and whether it's my daughter or not, there's no reason to be treating this person this way. We need the people, and we need her.
Male or female. Yeah.
But another comment that she said to me, she said, Dad, it's hard for me because I can't just show up to work like a guy can. You go to work, and if you're having a bad day, oh well, you're having a bad day. You drank too much the night before. Something's going on in your life that is bothering you or whatever, and everybody cuts you some slack. He said, if I go to work and I have a bad day, it's because everyone says I'm a bitch and I want a period and I'm PMSing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They equate it to something sexual or something gender based, as opposed to I'm just going through the same crap you go through every day.
Yeah.
She said, so I can't have bad days, or else I take this extra load on. And so she's worked through that over the years. Today she works, she's an industrial painter, and she's working up at Site C in Fort St. John on a crew of 5 people, and she's worked with them. 2 of them are women. And this company has woken up to women need the same opportunity that every man does. So they're great painters and they're great workers. They show up, they get paid. Yeah. Why have we taken so many years to get to that place and still are struggling with it with so many companies?
And we aren't there yet. Like we aren't even close. And I just want to go back to something when we started discussing about your daughters. And I said, oh my gosh, I wanted to speak on that story, tell that story, because I love the story. The story you shared with me wasn't that horrific part of it. But I remember you said, seeing your daughters having to go through it as a father, how it pained you to see your daughters have to go through it. So that's the part of the story. I don't want people to say, why would she be happy about the bad things? So that's awesome that that you have lived through it, that you saw where it was normal. Like a lot of things were normal 5, even 2 years ago, that we have realized, no, you can't say that. You can't, it's not about toughening up. I come from the Caribbean and you had to have thick skin. I am the only girl among 4 boys. And it was just that's it. You have to be tough. You had to be one of the boys. And I've seen that in workplaces and especially when I look back with some of the things that I've been through, nothing as horrible as what I've been through in the last 3 years coming to Canada. Canada would have been the last place I would have expected to have to not only receive such horrible treatment, but to have zero support. Right? Because a lot of people, again, the 93% of employers who say it isn't happening, they are aware of it. And so for us, we are speaking about equality. What about, so I hear you say that it's only the men, or mostly men, that be more than a bystander, that and of course, because it's mostly men in the trades. But what about women? Have you found that women are the bullies? And how do you address that? Because we know it goes, I don't know if in the trades it's less having women being the bullies themselves, whether towards other women or, other genders.
Well, there's that. Other races too. We've dealt with training with, you mentioned being from the Caribbean. I've done training with the roofing contractors, with refugees from Vietnam and refugees from Syria in the last few years. And they go through it as well. It's like you say, it's skin color, you're different, it's whatever it is that points you out as being different and unique, whether it's your gender or whether it's your race. That's a target for some people, and it certainly is inappropriate regardless of what happens. Now, women can become the aggressors, and the reason Be More Than a Bystander is men talking to men, because it's for 40 years women have tried to get people's attention, and we slough it off as well. It's a woman's issue, and it's not. It's a men's issue that's being enforced or inflicted on women. And so when we do it, when we make these presentations, we are speaking generally to men, and generally we want men to be the spokesperson. So it's not women complaining about their problems. It's men saying, this is an issue, and we are the perpetrators, most of them. Now, having said that, women certainly can be the aggressors, and I find that happens quite often. Well, not quite often, but within the trades it happens, because, this is where I'm coming from, the women have had to become something different to survive in the trade, and now it's easier for them to be on the bully side than it is to be the bullied. And so I've seen that happen a few times, and in my 8 years with the Roofing Contractors Association as the Director of Education, I had to kick 2 students out of school in the 8 years that I was there. One was a guy who he needed to be kicked out, but one was a woman, and it was after several requests. Believe it or not, the roofers came to me and said, we can't handle her language. Like, the roofers couldn't take her language. That's that bad. So she became something different to survive in that world, and went way too far, and became an aggressor. And so in trying to, sort her out or help her out, we met with her, we talked with her, and actually we said, sorry, you can't be until you can sort these things out. But it can be that bad, because in order to survive, they take it to the next degree.
And that's why I usually say to people, when you, for want of a better word, when you're fighting back or you don't like something and you're standing up for it, be careful you become the thing that you're fighting against.
Exactly.
Right?
It's what we're trying to do is have good workplaces where people come to work, accomplish things, work together in teams, and get paid to go home. One of the comments in one of the videos that you show is an iron worker complaining about all these new rules, and the guy says, if you can't tease and harass, there's nothing left to do except to build buildings. Well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
If you're coming to work so you can harass and bully people, then you're here for the wrong reasons. You shouldn't have a job.
Yeah. And just the mental, just the fear, the trauma, right? It's just so much that, imagine having to wake up every morning and exactly, like, you can write the script before you get from your bed to the bathroom. When you get there, like, you know. And I've had people say to me, people be like, why don't you quit? For me, I quit. I was like, well, it took some time, because you have to process what's happening. And your mental and physical being and everything around you is really trying to make sense of it. And when it was clear to me what had happened, there was no way I was going back into a toxic work environment. Now, not everyone can do that. So I have 2 questions for you. what do you do if someone, okay, so have you ever had to remove someone from an employer, maybe an apprentice, because you have spoken to the employer, nothing is happening? Have you ever had to do that? Or how do you support apprentice workers who are saying, listen, I need this job, Dave, but this is what is happening. My health is deteriorating. Like, how do you help that person? And is there any, and this would probably fall on either your side or the employer, what support do you provide that person who is going through that traumatic experience, where counseling and support is required, because we know it is required? I think that's two questions, but okay.
In the name of Industry Training Authority, it implies that we have some ability to enforce things, and we really don't. And so if somebody contacts me and says, I'm going through these problems at work and nobody's listening, I can go and talk to the employer and say, you're about to lose a really good employee. Are you aware of these things are going in your company? So I would talk to the employer directly. But I have no ability to enforce or anything more than encourage them to address it for the right reasons. But what we do as apprenticeship advisors, because we're familiar with the territories that we work in, we know who the bad actors are, and we know who the good actors are. And so if you're coming to me as a carpenter or as a plumber or whatever, and you're saying, I can't handle these guys, I probably already know of 2 companies that have accepted women in their businesses. The women are thriving, and I would certainly encourage them and support them in finding a new employer. Because when something is that caustic or that toxic, it's not going to get changed quickly.
No.
And even ringing the bell is going to be enough to actually increase the heat.
Yeah.
And so very often it's better I'll go talk to the employer. But if I don't get a sense that something's going to happen, then I would meet with that person and say, look, let's start looking for a different location for you to be employed. Stay in the trade, stay working in the industry, but let's find something that works for you. You shouldn't have to get up every morning and feel sick about having to go to work because you pay your bills, but you're going to have to put up with all kinds of nonsense today. That shouldn't be something somebody should look forward to. So that's the kind of help we offer as apprenticeship advisors. We can certainly listen and raise the point and potentially provide a way out more than we're probably not going to fix that situation. We're going to find you a way into something better.
Yeah. And is that part of ITAs? And I could ask my son, but it's interesting. Our 16-year-old recently went to a job interview, part-time, and she came back and she was like, when I was doing the onboarding, Mom, I had to find the workplace bullying and harassment policy. And I was like, yes, because that's something, right? So at least she's aware of it. Like for me, I wasn't, you get this big binder and you have to go through it. And I was so proud of her, but I've never asked or heard my boys say to me, and men are different, they'll be upset to hear me calling them boys, say to me, this happened, and I referred to the workplace bullying and harassment policy, or anything about workplace bullying and harassment policy during onboarding, which should be, because for me, I always say it's a health and safety issue, right? When you're joining the company, if there's a fire, we know what to do. If there's a smoke alarm, we know everything to do. We know where to get the med kit, to everything. No one says. So is that something ITA would ask employers to implement or ensure that employers do have those things when connecting new employees with employers?
We would encourage that, and I think there are lots of other organizations who, trade organizations who encourage those kinds of things. And as we said from the beginning, the last 5 years, I certainly see a lot more of those companies being required to have the harassment policies, and even in it's the big companies, granted, but the small mom and pop shop might not have that. But if you've got a decent sized company of 20 to 50 employees, they will have a harassment policy on file. And I know in ITA we were all required to read those things and sign off on them, that we knew what we were talking about. And that's a different kind of a setting. But I can certainly name numbers of even roofing contractors that I've worked with over the last many years who have those things in place, and they enforce those fairly strenuously now. Now, that wasn't true 5 years ago. So I think we're getting there, but it's going to take us more than 5 more years. It's going to take us a while.
We don't have 5 more years, Dave. We need it. We need to see it in our lifetime, because the world is burning.
And one of the things that I will say, is, and this is where it really bothers me, is we've been around 4% of the population of apprentices in the system are women. It's been like that for 20 years, maybe 30 years. But I know we're attracting more women than we used to. So why has that number not increased? Why are we still at 4%? And the reason is they don't stay. And we're pointing that out to all the employers. And right now, the only way a company can grow is through employees, having workers, having people who can build and develop and install things and fix things. That's how companies grow. And they're finally realizing that workers aren't disposable. You could go to any shop in my region here in the central interior, and they all, an automotive shop, they all said they could hire 5 more people if they could find them. Any construction company, they're doing good work, but they're held to this size of a company because they can't find them.
Yeah.
And so little by little, that's forcing us to recognize you can't go away employees. You can't afford to lose them, because that's how your company grows and develops. And so I think as we talk to employers, it's becoming more evident. But I still think although we're talking the talk, we're not necessarily walking the walk as well as we should or need to. But like I say, I can always find. I have a young woman that I was working with here in my area. She'd finished all of her 4 years of training. She should have been certified 2 years ago. And when I met with the company, they said, "Oh no, she's not very good." And I said, "Oh, why not? That's your fault, not hers. She's been here for 6 years." And anyway, so we had this long talk and blah 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 back and forth. The guy was not going to certify her and was still paying her $19.60 an hour after 6 years. Like, we pay roofers on day one $22 an hour. Like, my goodness, this lady should have been well into the late high 20s or 30s at the least. But that was his model. That was how he was going to do it. And so I finally phoned her and I said, "Look, you're not getting out of this. He's not changing this. I've done everything I can." And she said, "Well, what do I do?" And I said, "Give me 10 minutes." And I phoned 3 different companies and phoned her right back. And I said, "Okay, here's this company. Here's the guy you phone. Here's this company. Here's the guy you phone. Here's this company." They all said, "Can you get here today? Can you get here this afternoon?"
Wow.
I said, "So all of them will hire you as fast as you want to get there." And she went over to her preferred company and got an immediate $12 or $13 an hour raise and was on her path to certification.
$12 or $13 raise?
Yes, because she was making $19 an hour and she went up to 32 like overnight. And because she was putting up with crap that she didn't need to, because she thought that's how it worked.
Yeah.
So reaching out to somebody like an apprenticeship advisor, someone else within that same industry, I encourage people to say, don't be locked into this is me and I don't have any other choices. You've got all kinds of choices and opportunities. So, where we can, we try to, when we recognize a problem, we try really hard to fix the problem or move the person because we don't want to lose those employees. I get it a lot when I go to apprenticeship classes. We talk about a thing called the Apprenticeship Incentive Grant. So if you complete your first year of training and have completed 1,500 hours, you can get a $1,000 grant. women get a $3,000 grant. And, and I always get complaints from the boys in the room. Why do women get this? And that's when I pipe up and I say, because if we don't, we won't keep them. You guys treat them like garbage. To have some kind of incentive to keep them enthused. And then I do my little 10-minute rant about how we treat women in the trades. But it's still ingrained in us. That's not fair. How come she gets this and I only get that? But you get a lot of other things that we aren't talking about. Yeah.
I was at an event where the men, I love trades. Even back in my country in the Caribbean, I worked with trades involving getting young people, going to the schools to get them. It was a government-funded program, oil and gas. And so I have a passion for trades from a very young age. But that discussion at an event about, I'll say a month ago, he was speaking about trades and, IT, yada, yada, yada. And one of the gentlemen went down that road. Oh, it's about equality. Why do that? I'm like, oh, God, no, we are not doing this. And then we were just going on. And I'm like, okay, I'm not having this discussion because, right, you just keep going and you are female, you don't belong here, but why are they getting more than us, right? If we are speaking about equality. And again, this is, you have your work cut out for you, Dave. That's all I'm going to say.
No, it's true. It was, what was it, a month ago? The hospitality industry was hosting that event, and the chairman of some hotel, I can't remember where, but he, on National Women's Day, he, had all the women stand and recognize them, and was very kind. And then he said, "Now go clean some rooms and get back in the kitchen and do the dishes." Like, what? These are professional women who are attending this conference, who weren't brought into the kitchen to have a moment. This is what's wrong with you?
Performative. What he said did not come from here.
No.
Right? It was International Women's Day. So let's stand up and, right? It's the thing. And a lot of companies do that. And to be honest, I'm over it. Like,
it's tokenism,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh
anyway,
that event should have ended right there. People will be like, okay.
Well, as it turns out, he's been removed as the CEO and he's been dropped from boards. And, so I think we're getting to the place where clearly it was very tone deaf in what he said and what he did. And it was stupid in principle anyway. But we're at a place now where that's not accepted. And he's been removed from the boards that he was on. He's been fired from his job as the CEO. And from that comment and his slow response, his slow apology, which finally came. I think we're getting to a place where we won't accept that kind of nonsense. The sad part is I don't think anybody stood up at the meeting and said, hold on.
The bystanders, no bystanders,
exactly.
Right? Stood up to say, you did not just say that.
The whole room of them standing there with their mouth going, you didn't really say that, but nobody said anything.
Bystanders, yeah.
And it took follow-up and complaints and so on. But somebody should have stood up and said, hold on.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And that never happened.
Yeah.
So we're still got a long way to go. But I think this is what we're trying to accomplish is because when people say don't be a bystander, that means you should jump in and punch the person or you should get aggressive. And it's not.
No.
Just don't put up with it. Don't be part of it. By saying nothing, you condone it. You become part of it.
Even the woman, and I know we may have to run this series like in 2 parts, but even the woman who insulted on that day did not say anything. And that's to tell you there's a bit of, I think first it's like the shock, it's like, okay, I won't even go into that, but you are trying to process what just happened.
Yeah.
That even the people who were insulted didn't, because he's the CEO. He has powers, right?
Yep.
And then you have, right. So again, that's an interesting, that's a good way to end. our session today, Dave. Thank you so very much. This was very interesting. And again, we spoke with Dave Coleman from the ITA, Industry Training Authority of British Columbia, and how Dave got involved and his passion for being more than a bystander and really educating not just ITA's apprenticeship persons, but employers, because education is where it's at. And before we leave, Dave, what would you like to leave out there for women who are interested in trades, who left the trades? Like, what are your parting words?
I just would like to encourage women to consider the trades. It is challenging. I do believe, I have to believe, that it's getting better. That I think that there are people are becoming more aware of these kind of problems, and there are supports for you through either the BC Center for Women in Trades and Trades Training, or through the Ending Violence Association of BC, or through Work BC, or through WorkSafe BC. There's a number of places now that are aware of this problem and aware of the issues, and I think there's supports there for you if you find yourself in those problems. And when you reach out to those kind of supports, that they can work for you. And so I would encourage any women who would like to consider a position in trades to really get serious about it and give it a try. It won't be completely pain-free. It isn't for us either, for men either. But it shouldn't be worse. And I would encourage you to consider the trades as an option. We need women working in the field.
Yeah. Thank you so very much, Dave. And this is Camille McMillan-Ramrat, founder of the Canboulay Training and Development. You can check us out on Canboulay.ca, our website. We are also on all social media, and you can follow us on Apple and Spotify to find more about this fantastic program, and drop us a line, and don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. Thank you so very much, everyone, for coming, and talk to you soon.